Once in our nonprofit financial management life, we've probably encountered or been in a situation where we had to lose a multi-year foundation grant, or an organization that lost a multi-year foundation grant renewal, and it was not because the program that was being funded never worked. It was just because of the outcomes that were weak, because the program outcomes were solid and the work was real and was documented. But they lost it because when the program officers on the foundation side asked for a 3-year cost-per-beneficiary analysis broken out by probably program components, the finance team spent quite a lot of time, let's say 3 weeks, manually trying to reconstruct the numbers from their accounting system, because you see their system had not been designed to answer that question. So what happened is that they end up submitting the late report, and what happened on the other end is the funder moved on. And you see, that's not a story about bad programs or a bad organization. It's a story about weak finances. It's a story about a chart of accounts that was built for bookkeeping and not for strategy. And that distinction, bookkeeping versus strategy, is exactly what this video is about today. So as usual, my name is Rose, and I come with 2 decades in nonprofit sector. I work with the FARM framework, a structured approach to nonprofit financial health. And today, I want to go deep on one question: how exactly does your chart of account cost you grants, and what do you do about it? I'm not walking you through the account numbers today. This is a strategic conversation. The step-by-step design walkthrough is in a video that I did earlier, and you can watch it in this channel. What we are going to try to understand is why. And so, when you do the work, you understand what is actually at stake. There are 3 specific mechanisms, 3 ways a badly structured chart of accounts in dimensions directly undermines your grant funding. It's not abstract, concretely, predictably, and repeatedly. And the first is, you can't produce grant-specific financials without rebuilding the numbers from scratch every time. For example, most foundation grant agreements require a financial report in their defined template. A budget versus actual, for example, showing how the grant was spent across the lines. So if your chart of accounts or your system dimensions don't have a clean way to isolate grant-specific expenditures, every grant report requires someone to actually manually pull transactions and resort them. It takes time, it introduces error, and when a funder asks for a follow-up question, which they will do, you have to start the whole process over again. In a well-designed system, a grant financial report is a 3-minute export. In a poorly designed system, it's a 3-day project or even more. And funders will notice the difference, not because they know your chart of accounts, but because the late, inconsistent, or error-prone reporting is how they assess your operational capacity. The organizations that submit clean, accurate reports on time, every time, those are the ones that get renewed. So the second mechanism that is that you can't really demonstrate true program cost, which means you can't recover what it actually costs you to run your programs. This one is enormous, and it's massively underappreciated. Sometimes we clearly forget about it. So when a funder or maybe a foundation asks what it actually costs to run your program fully loaded, including a fair share of occupancy, HR, finance, and technology, you need a cost allocation methodology that produces defensive, auditable numbers. So that methodology runs through your chart of accounts. If your chart of accounts does not capture direct and indirect costs at the program level in a way that supports a formal cost allocation, you cannot calculate the true program cost. And if you cannot calculate the true program cost, you will chronically under-recover indirect costs. You will run programs at a structural deficit, and eventually you will face a sustainability crisis that looks like a funding problem, but it's actually a financial system problem. So the two are not the same. One you can fix with better funding. The other one requires rebuilding the infrastructure. The third mechanism is that your financial narrative to funders is weaker than it should be, and you may not realize it. So sophisticated institutional funders are increasingly financially very literate. They are reading your statutory reports, your 990s, and your published audited financials. They are asking about your operating reserve, your revenue concentration, your cost allocation methodology. When a finance director can sit down with a program officer and say, here is exactly what this program costs, here is the funding mix that supports it, and here is what unrestricted revenue covers versus what is grant restricted. This is completely different conversation than let me pull that together and get back to you. The ability to have that conversation in real time is not a personality trait. It is a system output, and it starts with the correct chart of accounts setup. So what sophisticated funders really look at is what we want to dive in. So let me tell you, I think when they review your financials, when a major foundation program officer looks at your grant application, for example, and your attached financials, they're not just checking whether your reports or your statutories are filed in time. They are reading it as a proxy for organizational sophistication. So they are looking at your functional expense allocation. If they see that your management and general expenses are suspiciously low, for example, or even non-existent in some instances, they know your cost allocation is off, which actually tells them your financial systems are immature, which again tells them you might struggle to manage a large, complex, multi-year grant. So they look at the revenue concentration. If 8% of your revenue comes from probably two sources, that's a risk flag. Sorry, I meant 80. If 80% of your revenue comes from just two sources, the revenue concentration is high on just your two sources, that's a risk flag, regardless of how strong your programs are. They look at your program efficiency ratio, your operating reserve, whether your financial statements tell a coherent story or require significant explanation. All of that information lives in your financial statements, and your financial statement comes out of your chart of accounts. And then this is the other thing that these funders do. They ask for custom financial reports in many cases, prescribed template. So in this, they are probably looking at cost per beneficiary, they are looking at revenue per program, they are looking at multi-year trend analysis, what was there in year 1, how have you spent in year 2, and what do you anticipate to spend in year 3. They are also looking at the budget variance with narrative explanations. So every one of those requests is either a 30-minute exercise or a 3-week crisis. And the difference is entirely of how your chart of accounts and your dimensions are designed. So I've sat in grant meetings where program officers say, we love the work, but we need to see a more rigorous financial infrastructure before we can make this commitment. That comment is never about the audit opinion. It's about whether the organization can produce on demand the financial intelligence a major funder needs to fix a 6 or a 7-figure commitment to their own board. So your chart of accounts and your dimensions is your financial intelligence infrastructure. It sets the ceiling on what questions you can answer and how fast you can actually answer them. So what to do actually if you are sitting here recognizing that your chart of accounts has this problem? So I would recommend that you start here. Don't try to fix everything at once. For example, a mid-year restructure without proper planning creates reconciliation complexity that can take months to untangle. The sequencing matters as much as the redesign itself. So before you redesign anything, you must conduct a gap analysis. Sit down with the 3 documents that we spoke about earlier. Your most recent grant report, your most recent statutory filing, and your most recent or your current board financial reporting package. And for each, ask what data did I have to manually reconstruct to produce this output. Every manual step is a structural gap. Write them down. And this list is your redesign brief. Not a theory, an actual brief grounded in real reporting pain. Then before you touch a single account number, understand your accounting system, what they can actually support, because each has different capacity for dimensions and classes. And we all know that a well-designed chart of accounts that helps your system execute whatever the output that you are looking for. So on timing, if you're within 6 months of fiscal year end, the cleanest path is usually to redesign now and then implement at the start of your new fiscal year, so that you get time to design it and also properly test it against your output report. And so that when you go live without creating the mid-year complexity. Also involve your auditors before finalizing anything. This is important. It will save you time in future, because I can also assure you your auditor has seen more non-profit chart of accounts than most finance directors will see in their career. So they are best placed to see a gap that is blind to you at the time of your implementation. Then these 5 steps that I have talked about, they are a sequence. A gap analysis tells you what's broken. System assessment tells you what's buildable. Timing tells you when to move. Your auditor tells you what the output has to look like. Then you can redesign. So here is what I want you to leave with. Your chart of accounts is the foundation of your entire financial reporting infrastructure. It determines what information your organization can produce, how quickly and how accurately. It shapes how funders perceive your operational sophistication, and it affects your ability to recover through program costs, to demonstrate impact, to sustain your program financially over time. It is not a bookkeeping decision, and it has never been. So if you've been running on an inherited chart of accounts and dimensions that were never designed with strategy in mind, you are not alone. Most non-profits actually are. But the organizations winning major grants, building strong long-term funder relationships, and achieving real financial sustainability have at some point made a deliberate decision to build the financial infrastructure right. That infrastructure starts with your chart of accounts. The step-by-step redesign walkthrough in the video that I had posted earlier. So subscribe if rigorous, practical, non-profit financial leadership content is what you are here for. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one, and this is the FARM framework.